This lesson, we are going to learn how to solve rational equations. Step 1, factor the denominators. Step 2, find the lowest common multiple for all the denominators. Step 3, let's remove the fractions by multiplying every term by the lowest common denominator. Step 4, then we solve the resulting polynomial equations. Example 1, the common denominator between those two fractions is 12, so let's multiply by 12 on both sides of the equation. Then you can see 4 goes into 12 3 times. 3 goes into 12 4 times. So we have 3 times by x plus 3 equals to 4 times by x minus 1. Let's expand it and simplify it. Collect the x on the left-hand side and move the constant to the right-hand side. We get x equals to 13. Let's try to do this question again by using common denominator. So we know the common denominator between 4 and 3 is 12. So on the left-hand side, we times by a 3 over 3. And on the right-hand side, we times by 4 over 4. Now they have the same denominator. This implies the numerator must be the same. So x equals to 13. Example 2, now we have a rational equation. First, we have to make sure it is already factored. It is already factored. Then, we just find our zeros. We let the numerator equals to 0. That means x equals to 2. Then, we have to state our restrictions. That means the denominator can never be 0. That means x cannot be 3. Therefore, x equals to 2 and x cannot be 3. Example 3. Once again, we have to find a common denominator between those two fractions, and the lowest common multiple will be x minus 4 times by x plus 2. So, the left-hand side fraction will need to multiply by x plus 2 over x plus 2. The right-hand side fraction will multiply by x minus 4 over x minus 4. Since those two fractions are equal and they have the same denominator, this implies the numerator must be the same. And then we can expand and simplify. Isolate the x on the left-hand side of the equation. Isolate the constant on the right-hand side of the equation. Divided by 10 on both sides. Now we get x equals negative 1 over 5. Now let's find the restrictions. So we know x minus 4 cannot be 0, means x cannot be 4. And x plus 2 cannot be 0, means x cannot be negative 2. Therefore, x equals negative 1 over 5. At the same time, x cannot be 4 and negative 2. Example 4. Now we have a more complicated rational equations. Step 1, we need to factor all the numerators and the denominators. So let's look at the first fraction here. The numerator can be factored to x plus 3 times by x minus 1 over the denominator can be factored to 2x minus 1 times by x plus 3 minus x over the second fraction, the denominator has a common factor of 3. So factor out of 3, then we have 3 times by 2x plus 1 equals the fractions on the right, the numerator is the difference of squares, which can be factored to x plus 1 times by x minus 1 over 2x plus 1 times by 2x minus 1. At the first fraction, we see both numerator and denominator have a common factor of x plus 3, so we are going to divide it to simplify it. Step 2, let's find the lowest common multiple for the denominator. So we have 2x minus 1, we have 3, we have 2x plus 1. So the lowest common multiple will be 3 times by 2x plus 1 times by 2x minus 1. Step 3, now we need to modify the equations so they all have the same denominator. Remember, whatever you multiply to the denominator, you have to multiply to the numerator as well. So for the first fraction, we need to multiply by 3 times by 2x plus 1. The second fraction, we need to multiply by 2x minus 1. The last fraction, we need to multiply by a 3. Since this is a rational equation and they all have the same denominators, this implies we can remove the denominator to have a polynomial equation. Now we can move on to step 4 to solve for x. Expand and simplify both sides of the equation and isolate all the terms to the left-hand side of the equation. Then we common factor out the x. then we will get x equal to 0 or x equals to 2. Once we find our roots, then let's find our restrictions. The restrictions are all the factors that are in the denominator. For the first one will be 2x minus 1 cannot be 0, means x cannot be half. Next one, x plus 3 cannot be 0, means x cannot be negative 3. And the last one, 2x plus 1 cannot be 0, means x cannot be negative half. Therefore, x could be 0 or 2, and x cannot be positive negative half, negative 3. Example 5. Salt water is flowing into a large tank that contains pure water. The concentration of salt, C, in the tank after t minutes is given by the function C at t, where C is measured in grams per liter. When does the salt concentration in the tank reach 3.75 grams per liter? First, let's replace C with 3.75. Next, let's switch 3.75 into a fraction. Now we have a rational equation. The next step to do is to find a common denominator, which is 4 times by 25 minus t. And after we have a common denominator and they are equal, then we can remove the denominator to have a polynomial equation to solve for t. Now we can expand and simplify and isolate the t on the left-hand side. Then we will get t equals to 67 over 3. Therefore, we know the concentration reaches 3.75 grams per liter at the time 67 over 3 minutes. Example 6. Jennifer bought a case of concert t-shirts for $450. She kept 2 for herself and sold the rest for $560, making a profit of $10 on each t-shirt. How many t-shirts were in the case? First, let's create our last statement. We're going to say that x represents number of t-shirts in the case originally. Then let's figure out the equation. We know the profit equals the revenue, take away the cost. However, that's the total profit equals the total revenue, take away the total cost. So the question here is talking about profit per t-shirt. Then we have to modify the equation to be profit per t-shirt equals the revenue per shirt minus the cost per shirt. From the question, we know she spent $450 to buy all the t-shirts, so each t-shirt will cost $450 divided by x. And then she kept 2 and sold the rest for $560, which is her revenue, so we know the selling price per t-shirt will be $560 divided by x minus 2. Now, let's substitute all the information we know into the equation that we created. The profit per t-shirt is $10, and the revenue per t-shirt is $560 divided by x minus 2, minus the cost, which is $450 over x. Now we have a rational equation. Once again, we have to find the common denominator between all three terms, which is x times by x minus 2. Then we can remove the denominator to have a polynomial equation. Next, we can just expand and simplify, isolate all the terms to the left-hand side of the equation, and we can use quadratic formula to solve for x, or we can use factoring. Then we will get 10 times by x minus 18 times by x plus 5 equals 0. This implies x equals to 18 or x equals negative 5, which is invalid as number of t-shirts can never be negative. Finally, let's find our restrictions to make sure our answer is not one of the restrictions. So, restrictions are x minus 2 cannot be 0, x cannot be 2, and x cannot be 0. Since 18 is neither of them, therefore we could say there were 18 t-shirts in the case originally. Example 7. Tom takes 5 days to paint a bedroom. Adam takes 3 days to paint the same room. How much time is required if both of them are working together? Here, we're going to introduce a new formula for things to work together. 1 over A plus 1 over B equals 1 over together. let's apply it to the questions that we have. So we write 1 over Tom's time plus 1 over Adam's time equals to 1 over Together's time. So we have 1 over 5 plus 1 over 3 equals 1 over t. Let's combine the fractions by having a common denominator on the left-hand side of the equation. Then we will know a over 15 equals 1 over t. So we can see the time to work together will be 15 over 8. Therefore, we say 15 over 8 days are required to paint the room together.